stuff like actually low toughness, high armor save, it's actually useless. So I grenaded the Triumph, and I think I did 3 wounds because it's tough 3, and it was a high armor save with an invul and a feel no pain, or whatever it
All right,
was.
guys,
So
ready to go?
Yep.
All right, just give sound check. Nick, Francois, sound check.
How's it
Testing,
going?
testing. Hello, hello.
All right, Francois, say something again.
Say something again.
All right, I don't know. See, Farsight not here. Give us a sound check. All right,
Oh,
sounds okay.
Failure.
All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the CanHammer podcast. This is episode 189. I got to work on my good evening. It's kind of weird.
The big crypt lead up, yeah.
All right, so yes, welcome to episode 189. Chris is away tonight, so we are carrying on the good work here. And I have pretty much regulars to the podcast now, Nick and Francois. And
hello.
welcome back, guys.
Hello, hello. Thank
Perhaps
you.
of no particular coincidence, since we are all basically the only people we're all allowed to hang out with. And as the world is literally going to shit before our very eyes again, we are here to talk 40K. Man, how are you guys doing? You worried about this second wave business?
Yeah. Totally. Numbers not looking good. I'm just crossing my fingers and toes that my kid's school stays open. That's pretty much.
Slowly going down one by one, man. Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, my kid. My kid. Well, he's 1. So, and I'm basically at home with him now, a large part because of COVID. So, I'm not crazy about it because of the whole social aspect we're going to lose for a bit. But I'm, I guess, a little bit better sheltered than most.
Yeah. So my kid's school just got their first case yesterday, and they contact traced it, and we didn't get the contact trace email, so I guess we're good to go still. But it's only a matter of time, I have this feeling, that it's going to be locked down like it was back in April and May, which would be a shame. Mm-hmm. As people already know, we're doing a little bit of a bat rep lockdown for another 2-3 weeks now, just to see where it goes with the start of school and the new numbers. But hopefully we'll be able to resume bringing trusted individuals back to the basement for some gaming, because I want to try this new list and I can't right now, which is annoying.
Oh, I know what you mean. I'm the same.
All right. And then on top of that, of course, winter is coming, although it was beautiful today. But winter is surely and inevitably coming, and nothing worse than, I mean, you could argue it both ways. If you got to stay indoor anyway, might as well be winter outside, but it's kind of nice to be able to go out for walks and stuff when you were in your isolation, and won't be as nice in the wintertime.
My dog a couple hours a day, and I'm not looking forward to having to do that in February.
Yeah. So stay safe, everybody out there. Don't do something stupid. And let's keep things under wrap. Okay, enough public health announcements for one cast. So let's just talk a little bit about hobby. What are you guys up to?
I am painting some Harlequins. I just got my stencils today from Fallout Hobbies, and they have really nice stencils, and so I'm experimenting with some colors, and looking forward to painting my murder clowns. I got a couple of bikes and a transport done tonight, but I'm not sure I like the color. I might give myself a redo. I'm just still working that out.
Are you doing the classic diamond with the faded color sort of scheme thing?
Totally. Yeah. Diamonds and bright colors. And I'm not going to go too crazy on the details, and I'm definitely not doing hand-painted diamonds. It's all going to be airbrush stencils, and on the models that are too small for airbrush stencils, it's just going to be blocks of color.
Yeah.
But it'll look good.
Hand-painting motley, I can't imagine doing that.
So you said you're not super happy with the results you have so far?
Yeah, it's not bright enough. I just want I want a black model, and then I want the blue and the pink to really pop. And so I'm gonna reprime and start over tomorrow. This was just an experiment tonight.
So you consider it a diamond in the rough?
Oh
Hey,
dear.
you see what I
Oh
did
That was
there?
dear.
awful. That was awful.
Oh
You should be
gosh.
ashamed
I
of
should have
yourself.
seen that one
Yeah,
coming and like muted
yeah, I
it.
know. I was like, I led up. Yeah, just
You had that weird smirk on your face. I was like, where is he going with this one?
I thought you knew where I was going with that. Yeah,
That's isolation humor for you people. Yes. Okay.
I'll have them all night. That's all right. I'm here all week. I'm like Francois. I wasn't as productive this week. Since March, I've been like crazy hobby between like I painted Darren's army, I painted Grey Knights, I basically painted Death Guard army. So this last week I took a break, but starting maybe tomorrow or next week, I'm gonna start on actually a quick Necromunda gang because Andrew's been roping everybody into doing Necromunda. I'm not sure when I'm gonna be able to play. Yeah, I'm not sure when I'm gonna be able to play, but I'll have the gang painted for when perhaps I'll get to play a game.
I think he said he bought one of every single gang. Isn't that what he said? I think that's what he did.
I have no idea.
He's
to be
just trying to
honest.
fill the hole, the gap left by Batman.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well, he messaged me, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't really have time, but yeah, it looks cool." And he was like, "Yeah, it's like 40K Mordheim," and that's where I got sold. And the gang was only like $50, and I was like, "If this is all I need, I'll buy the gang. But if I need like everything else, no, it's all you need." Okay.
Yeah, it's never
So-
all that you need. That is like
Yeah.
like the never spoken phrase of GW games.
Well, I got the corpse grinder, so they match chaos. They're pretty chaosy. So worst case, they can be something else.
Yeah, I told him I would play the whatever the Bogren army was. I would just use my actual Bogren.
Yeah.
Seems
enough,
reasonable.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I have not done any hobby between work, the channel, my newfound love of cycling, and kids. I've not had any time. I don't actually have that much to hobby. I have a Harlequin army, which I have no particular motivation to actually finish. I've got this bust, which I'm still too scared to start painting. So, that's my hobby at the moment, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to some news. We don't want to spend too much time on news. First of all, I want to hear your guys' thoughts on the new announcement of core units and the restriction of rerolls and auras to just affecting core. What do you guys think of that?
I like it. I like it a lot. Obviously, I play a lot of Space Marines. I have 3 different Space Marine armies, and so it's going to impact me first. But thinking beyond that, if they roll out that change to the entire game, as it looks like they will, I think it gives them a lot of granularity in balancing units that wasn't there before. And it's also just fluffier. Like, you don't want your chapter master sitting at the back babysitting a bunch of artillery pieces. You want him at the front leading with the troops. So, frankly, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to sell it on the idea of fluff that, he's not going to give himself rerolls and stuff. But really, it's a remove, add keyword type fix that can seriously affect the efficacy of a unit. How about you, Nick?
Gives them tools for balancing.
Yeah. Without having to rewrite a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I think it can only be really a good thing because it's only a good thing because, like you guys already said, it's just a way of adjusting who gets what if something ends up being too good, unlike an unanticipated thing that happens when you add a rule, then it's just quick to adjust, no longer core or is core or whatnot, and helps reduce a little bit of a feeling of oppressiveness that some of these armies can have, and adjust the feel of some armies. Like, while in Space Marines, tanks might not be core, maybe in Guard they will be, because Guard is more of an army where your officer cadre are going to be in the back and not leading from the front. So I think it's only good any way that they can kind of balance the game with little tweaks like that. I think is really only a good thing.
What I could see happening is, like, if you have a tank commander, he could have a warlord trait that makes other vehicles core or something like that. That would be.
Or they have a special tank company where their tanks are core, but their troops aren't. Yeah, there's all kinds of different things that they can do.
I think it'll also change the way you play, because you may or may not necessarily change the units you take, but now you have less or more kind of stay within 6-inch sort of gameplay, which it dominates a lot of armies, so you'll have less characters just babysitting things, and so maybe actually make it a little bit more dynamic and less bubbly, because it's kind of like stay in your bubbles sort of thing still for a lot of armies. So who knows? I mean, we don't know what's going to be core and what's not core yet. And the first people to get it will be Marines and Necrons, and then other armies won't get it until their book comes out. So some armies might not get it for quite some time. So it'd be interesting to see how that interacts. Probably not going to be super noticeable, to be honest. But yeah, I like it. I like it. Okay, one other thing I want to bring up. I'm just going to pull up the window here. Chapter approved tactical deployment. Okay, so they have spoiled this book that is being on pre-order this weekend. And basically, this is a new, I presume, like small little bound chapter approved book with new stuff in it. So you can now bring in match play, and they've said it a number of times for competitive play, you can bring your own terrain. And so what they've done is there's these little data sheets, and the terrain, the one they've chosen to show is not like a terrain set. It's like a rune wall and a smaller rune wall that you put together to make this thing called a storage fane, which is 40 terrain points. And they said that in Combat Patrol, which is that the 500 point games?
Yes.
Something like that.
You will need 50 to 100 terrain points. So everyone's bringing like 1 or 2 pieces of terrain, I guess. And it's got rules, and they outline its kind of, real estate. And then the missions are going to have new secondaries that have to do with terrain and buildings and things. What do you guys think of this?
I absolutely hate it. I think it's terrible for so many reasons. I have a list of reasons why it's a terrible idea, as long as my arm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not crazy about it. I think in like a narrative or like a campaign or like the same buddy that you play with every week or group, maybe that could work. But I'm just looking at the perspective of LVO comes up. We're all in Canada, like in the Ottawa area, and we're all going to get on a flight together. I went to LVO last year. Just getting an army that fit in one Battle Foam 720 case was stressful enough getting to LVO, and that like barely fit my army. So like, what now? I would have to bring terrain. I just I don't see it being. I just don't see it being adopted, especially by the bigger events. And like when I said this before, I went to LVO. They had the top 100 layouts, terrain schemes for different missions. They can just do that again, and that'll be fine, in my opinion. That was just a great system. I feel this is going to fall flat for competitive play.
If they hadn't said it's for competitive play, I'd be fine with it. I think, okay, yeah, that's a nice addition for like Crusade games or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they're trying to market it for tournaments, or at least that's what it sounds like they're doing. Maybe I'm overreading some of the language there, but that part makes no sense to me. It feels like it'd be easily abusable. It'd be a headache. Transport is an issue. There's like, obviously we haven't seen the full book, but just the idea seems odd to me.
So what's interesting is that this book reminds me of the old was it like Battle in the Skies book in 7th or whatever, where you had those stupid airplanes and everybody just panned it and didn't adopt it? Like, I don't even know who had that book. This kind of reminds me of that. So there's already been 2 or 3 threads on the TO forum about this is stupid, and actually Reese has come out too saying like this is probably not going to be adopted by bigger events because it's like you physically just can't. And policing what people bring and calling what, like, how are you going to do that?
Logistically, it's a non-starter, I think. And
so I don't think this is going to fly. And so probably those secondaries are not going to be a thing. Now they did also introduce that there will be 6 new missions for competitive play. They posted one for incursion size, which is I think 1,500 or 1,000, something like that. And it's interesting. So they have, you have to hold these objectives, but now they have something called a terrain marker, which they didn't explain what that was. And anyway, so we'll see if it probably involves more kind of terrain interactions. So it'll be interesting to see whether this whole book just kind of gets like forgotten about because it's kind of silly. That will be very interesting.
Like, I'm already annoyed with fortifications, and nobody really takes them that often. So can you imagine like terrain being a bigger part of your army? Like nobody paints a well, shouldn't say nobody, but like I paint my models, I paint a Death Shroud Terminator. I'm like, yeah, you're gonna go kill stuff. I'm not gonna paint a wall and be like, yes, you're gonna go wall. You,
I have a Fortress of Redemption looking at me right
you're
there.
gonna go
I want to be
redeem.
able to use it.
Yeah.
But let's say we adopted this. There's going to be one piece of terrain that has some broken ass rule that everybody is just going to bash out of some crappy terrain that they have in their basement and bring it to tournaments, right? Like
Sky Shield landing pad. Then they're gonna bring their Warhound Titan. It's gonna be a nightmare.
Okay, let's move on. We're going to talk about the little RTT that we went to on the weekend. Our nicely 8-person socially isolated RTT in a closed store. So I think we met all the requirements. So we won't spend too much time talking about my games because I've already talked about that last night, and most of our viewers probably the same. But let's just go. Francois, what did you bring to this RTT?
So I brought my brand new White Scars, an army that I really, really enjoy. I think I did a good job with the painting. They look awesome, and they're a very different playstyle for me that I think is so much more fun than the usual gun lines I play. But because it was literally my games number 3, 4, and 5 with the 2, 3, and 4 actually with the army, I'd played them once before. I was going into it not really expecting that much. I was kind of just going in there to see what the White Scars could do, and so yeah, it was a pretty fun time. I really enjoyed taking out the Sons of the Khan.
Yeah, so your army did look really good considering you painted the whole thing in like 3 days or something.
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
No, it looked really good. And and Nick, what did you bring?
I brought my Death Guard Thousand Sons that I've been working on. So it's 2 patrols, 1 Death Guard with a Demon Prince, 10 Poxwalkers. It had 2 Mephitic Blight Haulers. It had 5 Spawn that had the Feel No Pain, 2 Plagueburst Crawlers. It had the Flamer guy, who's also like the Judiciary equivalent in a sense. And it had 5 Plague Marines with 2 Flails. And then it had, my Thousand Sons had Armon, 20 Rubrics with 2 Soul Reaper Cannons, and 5 Scarabs with a Soul Reaper Cannon.
Okay, so why'd you drop the Grey Knights?
Well, I just felt so I'm not as well. I say that I'm not as practiced with Grey Knights, but also I guess I feel the way they play right now, it's still centered around Paladins, but I find Paladins very slow, and there's a lot you can do with them. And I got a Dread Knight to add to them. I think the biggest reason was the feels bad of Abhor the Witch. If you come to, like, when I found I fought armies that had Psychers, I would win. Like, I was doing really well. But strong armies that happen to be like Admech and, there's a number of strong armies right now that don't have Psychers. So to them, that's an automatic free 15 points. And everybody kind of says, well, a lot of armies have these free 50 points, but not necessarily. Not really, right? Because, Titan Slayer, yes, that's kind of in a sense a free 15 points, but you still have to kill a knight.
3 knights.
You still have to kill 2, 3 knights to max that, and that's hard work. Some people can't kill 1. Or a big game hunter on like some Admech lists, you have to kill Dune Rider or the Scorpius that are in the back of their, you know what I mean? Like, versus Grey Knights, you need a couple strike squads for board control. Once they die, and they're just 5 wound Marine, like 5 wounds, that's 3 points right there.
You're going back to your roots, your Chaos roots.
Yeah, going back to my Chaos roots. So that's kind of why I decided to do that, and it's not as easy to give up Abhor the Witch.
Yeah, so I just brought Custodes as usual. I brought the list that I played last time, 4.7. And if you want to know what 4.7 is, join the Discord. It's right there. Woohoo! Okay, so for your first game, Francois, you played
Knights.
You played Knights again.
I gotta say that. That game was eye-opening in many, many ways because I was really not pleased with going against Knights game one again for the second RTT in a row. Because I mean, I guess our meta is a little weird in that there's always one random guy who brings Knights,
In Ottawa.
but I
Yeah.
wasn't tooling up to kill Knights because Knights are actually fairly rare nowadays. So I didn't think going in that I had enough anti-tank. I had 2 units of Eradicators and a Dreadnought, and that's it. And I figured that's not enough shooting. And I was really, really scared, especially since I went second again against a Knight army that is predominantly melee, House Terrans, so they can fight twice. They have the pluses to advances and charge. I mean, they cross the table, especially with the new small board size, quickly. But it was really interesting how this game played out because I knew that if I got charged by the Knights, it was over. So I basically just hid in a corner of the table. So I went and took as little real estate as I possibly could. I was hiding in the corner and I was just biding my time. And turn one, the Knights do what they do, like they advance towards me. He has some non-line line of sight shooting carapace weapons. I think he kills an Eradicator. So I'm like, great, my what little anti-tank I have is already dying. And then I line it up so that my anti-tank has vision on one knight, but the other knights won't have vision on my anti-tank. Like I'm behind terrain, so I'm like, all right, I'm gonna get to shoot him for free for this turn. I need to get lucky and kill a knight. I didn't, not even close. So I kind of whiffed my shooting turn one. I'm like, oh dear. I had moved some bikes to move block a little, which is kind of hard because knights can move over bikes. So you have to like measure and see where they can end up with their base and make sure you're in the way so they can do it. His turn two, he kills a few more of my things. Gets to my turn two, and I'm like, well, I would like to wait until turn three to really come alive as waste cars and get the extra damage, but I can't because I won't have an army if I wait till turn three. So turn two, I have two combat knights in my face. My army is now in the very far back corner, but about only 8 inches from two knights, so there's no more running. And I was in awe of the pure melee power of White Scars because I killed 3 knights in one
You
turn.
weren't even in assault yet.
No, I wasn't even in Assault Doctrine yet. Okay, granted, I did have to double fight some Blade Guards, so it took like 3 activation of Blade Guards to get through the Gallant, and I got a little bit lucky in that his hit back whiffed a little. And my Assault Intercessors with the Chaplain, with the Plume of the Plains Runner, which is a +1 to charge, made their charge from Deep Strike into a Helverin and just butchered that. But I was like, all right, well, I thought I was losing, but now I'm clearly winning just in one combat phase. That was absolutely amazing. I've rarely seen a game turn on its head like that. And maybe I was never in real danger. I just didn't know what the army could do well enough to realize that I wasn't actually in real danger. But I remember Jeremy walked past the table and whispered in my ear, like, it's not going great. Well, in my ear, like from a meter away, because we were trying to distance. But he told me, like, it's not looking good for you. And I'm like, no, I think I'm losing. And then 15 minutes later, he walked past the table again and he went, what happened? So that was actually a really, really fun game. Great opponent, Rickard. We had a great game. And it was just a super weird situation, though, where I went from 100% convinced I was losing to, oh, look at that. I've killed half his army and now I'm winning.
It's kind of like our game from the last tournament.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Nick, you played Dom first round with the Salamanders Boogeyman.
I did. That was an excellent game. So I was driving up, and I had set some rules for myself that I was going to do. And it's funny that we had that traps episode not too long ago because I was thinking about this, but I kind of fell into all the traps again. So one big rule I had set for myself was I didn't want to overexpose my rubrics because they can be tough, but really only once you have the buffs on them. If you don't have the buffs on them, they're not quite as tough and they can still be pulled off. So anyways, it's like kind of a hammer and anvil deployment. We go, and I deployed kind of all on one flank, but then put the rubrics on the opposite flank. And the trap I fell into is rubrics have this strat where you can double shoot them if they don't move. So the appeal is if they start on the line, and I have range to the objectives, then if Dom moves on the objectives, I can double shoot whatever he has off of them. And then like at that point, he was going to put his like scouts or land speeders, because he had some scouts and land speeders amongst all the other stuff you would typically see in a Salamander's list. Then I'd remove them, and then I would eliminate kind of his ability to get across the board quickly, or he would put like he had a unit of Centurions, then I'd be able to at least damage his Centurions right away. So like that was a sound plan, and then knowing that his Centurions would have been in range, they wouldn't do too much because I'd be on a 2-up save. Except I kind of forgot he had, in a sense, the drop pod with grab, and underestimated like what they would do to the rubrics.
Oh yeah.
And so anyways,
that one CP strat, it's just
Yeah, and but to be honest, it doesn't much matter. Like they shouldn't have been in that spot anyways. There was no sense in ever really putting him, like exposing them to that, because the rubrics are still a 400-point unit where there's a lot of my damage. And so overexposing them just essentially means I'm giving them away for free, and I'm losing that damage dealing unit and like starting the game 400 points under. So yeah, he threw in the drop pod. I tried to pop their invul to a 4, but that AP and then the re-rolling to wound and stuff like that and amongst other things in his army, he'd pulled it down to like only a couple models. So that put me on the back foot in terms of like unit parity. Like he started with my big kind of blob unit being off the board. It was kind of a first, with that mistake in mind, then it didn't have to be a first turn game, but I made it a first turn game when I'd overexposed them like that. Because if I had gone first, then they could teleport and do their thing, but you can't guarantee that, right? Nevertheless, it still was a close game where I was kind of just crawling up one side, beating off, like you're like fighting off his units coming in from outflank and whatnot, and withstanding his damage and trying to return it and chase his while we stand, we fight. But him being able to throw the drop pod in right away and have units on an objective and whatnot gave him the early kind of lead in the board control, especially with me not having rubrics to show up and return fire. So it was actually like I think a 73 to 55 point win for Dominic. And that's literally just one primary, his while we stand, we fight, and like that one land speeder that I rolled a 1 on the damage versus a 2 damage. So like it wasn't a lot that kind of could change that fight. It's just I just kind of misplayed it a bit, and also fell into other traps. Like for example, I bum rushed my Demon Prince up to get one of his Contemptors because he had while we stand, we fight. But then he popped a Salamander strat where, some aggressors could heroically intervene and whatnot.
Yep.
So they came
from
in.
2d6 away.
And, yeah. So I was like, okay,
it's basically
that's no
stooping
problem.
dive.
So yeah, exactly. And then so I was like, well, maybe I have this chance where I kill the aggressors and the Contemptor. So I split my attacks.
Like, I wish I had that strat. Like, that's such a good strat.
It is a good strat. So anyways, I put some wounds on the aggressors. I think I kill 1 or 2 because the Demon Prince is only AP2. So all he has to do is spike a couple of 5-up saves and they don't disappear. I'm running the sword, so each kill would kill an aggressor. And then, of course, like I rolled well on the Demon Prince, but the Contemptor is still tough enough to kill. They're 2-up save, 12 wounds or whatever. So I still have to put enough wounds through them. And I'm relying on Death of the False Emperor. And I think the Contemptor was on like 2 wounds at the end of that. And I realized that was a mistake because not only, will I lose my Demon Prince, and I didn't. I actually got lucky. I bossed my saves while I lose my Demon Prince, but now I didn't kill the while we stand, we fight. And even though I kept my Demon Prince in that situation, it still meant I had to continue chasing that Contemptor, whereas I could have focused on other things versus just having gotten rid of it and then deal with something else later. So, yeah, that was a game in terms of learning, again, not to fall for traps, but also, I don't know, it was a good game to learn the weaknesses in my list and where I needed to adjust and my play style. So, yeah, that was my first game. Dom outplayed me, and
you were supposed to win, Nick, I'll remind you.
I know, and to be honest, I had all the tools in my list. That's all on me, man. Like my list is, I stand by. I like my new list better, but I stand by that list. It's a good list, and I think I had everything I needed to win. It's just that was on me
Yeah.
for overexposing myself, and I paid the price.
I mean, Dom's a great player, and he played a hard AF list, and so spoilers, he did go on to win the tournament. And unfortunately, we won't hear about Chris's because Chris played him in the last round, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we
And
won't
Chris
get
is
the
busy doing his photo shoot for GQ Warhammer right now, so
yeah.
that's why he couldn't make it to the cast.
So my first game was a rematch against Will Paul and his Death Guard. His list didn't have 37 wound Morty anymore, but he had the Plague Marine grenade bomb. He had a 5-man Blight Lord Terminator, a much more reasonably sized Terminator unit. 3 Plague Scholars, 3 the little ones, whatever they're called, Blight something.
Amphibic Blight Haulers.
Disease something, pox something. Blight
The
Haulers.
little-
Yeah.
the ticks.
He had a Rhino, a couple of zombie units, and the usual Nurgle Demon Prince and Typhus. And really, this game came down to like 3 things. First of all, him putting his Plague Marines on one side of the field, so I just avoided the mortal grenade thing by going to the other side of the field. So he didn't get that off on me. And then secondly, he chose Ritual and rolled the worst psychic rituals you have ever seen. He rolled 3, 3, 4, and 3 on like his ritual rolls. And so I have sisters that give -1 to cast. I have a 3+ deny strat. I have another strat that just lets me deny on a roll. And of course, not hard to beat a roll of 3 or 4. And so I actually denied him scoring the ritual pretty easily. And then he also chose Killmore, which is not usually a good choice against my army. Although it is hard to kill his army. Actually killed surprising a lot of his army. He chose the mission one, which was like to have X% of your units left. And I actually managed to kill 50% of his army. And so he chose bad secondaries, and it cost him the game. So I won that one like 70 to 50 something. So it was close. It was a tough game. Will is a great player. Love playing against Will, but he just chose bad secondaries. And his ritual rolls just let him down like really badly.
Well, I think he might have fallen in the same traps that I like against Dom, is just defaulting to secondaries. Like against Dom, I defaulted to deploy scramblers, but on Hammer and Anvil, and he had like a little bit of an MSU army, he was actually able to completely screen off his end zone, and I actually could score deploy scramblers, where normally I feel like that's like sometimes an auto 10 points. I fell into that.
Yeah.
So I think maybe Will kind of similarly just had his standard ones that he takes and kind of rolled with it.
Yeah. So, okay, round 2, Francois.
Round 2, I was up against Chris and his sisters.
Okay.
And I think on paper, I probably had an advantage, or at least that's what we both thought going into the game. The main difference is that Chris has gotten a lot of practice with the sisters, and I was on my 3rd game with the White Scars, which, sure, make fun of me all you want for playing a lot of Space Marines. They are Space Marines, but they play very differently from my other 2 Space Marines army, which are Ultramarines and Iron Hands. They're like, they play closer to Harlequins than they do to the other Space Marines. And I just made a bunch of mistakes. I misplayed it. I think against a lesser player, I might still have been able to recover from the positioning mistakes that I made. But Chris is too good a player to not pay for the errors that I made, and he didn't really make obvious mistakes in return. So in the end, I think I lost by 15 or 20 points. It was close enough, but it came down from my perspective to me mispositioning my units. And so I gave his Repentias too easy access to my stuff by I could have been on the other side of a wall, like just an inch away, so that there's no space for his bases, and not let him touch my stuff. But I don't know what went through my brain. I know this stuff in theory, but I made this little positioning mistake, which he then capitalized on. Again, though, I think it's a credit to the power of the White Scars once turn 3 this time comes around. I was really on the back foot. He had killed a lot of my good stuff. Oh, the thing that really broke my heart in that game, he blew up my Impulsor, which then blew up. And then I rolled a 6 on Khosrow Khan and killed Khosrow Khan with the Impulsor Explosion with 6 mortal wounds.
Nice.
I like that.
I like that.
Yep.
That sucked a little bit. I mean,
Not a tear shedding right now.
I don't want to blame the dice there because I put myself in a position where that could happen. And I could have definitely positioned better, differently, played with my deep strikes differently. But anyway, I don't want to ramble on too long. My point that I'm trying to make is that turn 3 comes around. I don't have Khosrow Khan anymore because he blew up. I don't have my Eradicators or my Dreadnought anymore because they died to Repentius. All I have really left is 25 Assault Intercessors and a Chaplain, which points-wise is not a lot. But then I proceed... Oh, and a couple of Blade Guards. And then I proceeded to actually kill a lot of stuff and claw it back. And it ended up being a mid-70s to mid to high 50s kind of game, something like that. So the score wasn't that close. Like I was never going to pull it back fully and actually manage to claw it back to win. But I was impressed with how few assets I had left still managed to do a lot of damage. White Scars and the Assault Doctrine, with the Chaplain giving them reroll wounds and the +1 damage, they can do some work.
Yeah, +1 damage is crazy.
With Francois talking about like his, I don't have Khan, I don't have the Eradicator, I don't have this, I just have like that speech, Churchill speech from The Darkest Hour. We'll fight on the landing grounds. It's just like this rising speech to his army before turn 3.
That's what it felt like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
As Khan dies in the explosion.
Oh man, Khan dying to the explosion broke my heart. He was like, because Chris was like making fun of me, and he said, "I'm gonna kill your Impulsor, and it's gonna blow up and kill all your army." And then he killed the Impulsor, and I rolled the 6, and you can't reroll those anymore. And I'm like, okay. And now I look it up because I've played Impulsors for all of 2 games, and I'm like, oh no, 6.
Oh, dear God.
and I start rolling for stuff, right? And I do 1 mortal on the Blade Guard, 2 mortals on the Chaplain, and then it comes to Khosrow Khan, which is probably the most important character in my army, and I roll a 6, and he has 6 wounds, and he dies.
Yeah. He was making fun of you? Well, with friends like us, you don't need enemies, eh?
To be fair, now that I think back on it, it is really funny, but at the time, it stung just a little bit.
Shit like that happens all the time in Warhammer.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so
the dice game. You can't blame the dice. You have to think about how you could have put yourself in a position where that doesn't happen.
Yeah, but you have to protect your characters by keeping them within 3 inches of vehicles these days.
True. Or intercessors, or
All right, Nick, your game 2.
My game 2 was against Jeremy and his AdMech.
Oh yes.
And Chris and I go back and forth on this, but I still think AdMech are one of the top armies because they have a lot of tools in their toolbox. And then Jeremy's also a great player. So with all that, me prefacing this, you can probably guess what happened in this. This mission was the Dawn of War deployment, but like the objectives were kind of in the like staggered lanes, but closer to the Hammer and Anvil deployment zones, if you can picture that.
The wide ones.
Yeah, the very wide ones. And this is a mission I've played before, and I've actually had a lot of practice with AdMech, and I've beat AdMech multiple times with this army in a similar list that Jeremy has. So I was actually comfortable playing this game. But the one kind of critical error I made right away was I spread my army way too large to cover those 2 objectives at the beginning of the game. And this was a mission where you only need to hold 1 objective for your 5 points. You don't need to hold 2. And since being like Death Guard and Thousand Suns with such a killy small range and terrain and stuff, the right decision here is to focus on a flank and then just move up that flank to get the objectives where you can mutually support.
Yeah.
At that point, 10 or 12 inches apart, right? You can actually have 1 unit sit across 2. That's how close.
Turn it into a Hammer and Anvil.
Exactly, turn it into a Hammer. And I know that, and I normally play like that. I don't know what it was. That Saturday was just that was my day to just have it like turned off in my head. And so I deployed kind of wide, like spreading my army between those 2 objectives. And being a very killy army of his, it's not going to take much for him to get an angle on one of those objectives, blow everything off of there, and then I'm kind of stuck in that sense. So that's kind of exactly what happened. Where I tried to redeploy later, I found that I had sacrificed too much trying to cover the board early to be able to really make a like the hammer and anvil push late game. It still wasn't a blowout. Like I think it was like a 70 or 65 to 50, 55 point game. Again, another one where it's like you get one more primary and a couple more secondaries, and that changes the game. But he had like While We Stand We Fight on two of his Scorpiuses and Call, so that's kind of tough. And I actually got two of them because I had my Death Shroud, kind of like ace in the hole that deep struck in the back of his lines, and like was able to charge into the Scorpius, and whatever they touch, they kill. So that was not too bad. But another mistake here again was I deployed the rubrics on the table, and I can deep strike them, and I don't know why I haven't deep struck them yet. He had those two flyers, and based on the size of the board, there's nowhere you can go to hide from those flyers because they can turn at any point in their movement, and they drop mortal wounds. So like, I tried to put my rubrics as far away as I could, but his flyers were on both sides of his board, so at least one could get, but more than likely both. He dropped over and killed 10 like right away. You fail morale, you lose one, roll a couple dice, lose 2 or 3 more, then you're only on like 7 rubrics. And they still have a use at that point, but the use that they're built for at that point is gone. They've been neutered. So yeah, again, and he went first. So again, another situation where it doesn't have to be a first turn game. I made it a first turn game. So yeah, it's just 2 games at this point of me getting my face shoved in the dirt to be reminded, like, do not make these mistakes. So now it's like the rubrics, if there's any chance that they get killed turn 1 by a deep striker or planes or something, just deep strike them, so that at least they will have a chance. And I don't know why, like, I haven't been playing like I've had people come and ask me with lists of advice and stuff where they'll take this or that or this, and I'll suggest something else, and like, well, but this is super killy. I was like, it doesn't matter if it doesn't live. You know what I mean? So I'm just gonna take my own advice. But anyways, it was a great game. Sorry.
Yeah. No, keep going.
No, I was gonna say it was a great game. He won it, and lessons learned.
Yeah, I think this mission specifically, where it's the Dawn of War and your own two objectives are almost in the corner. You really have to think about your army's ability to hold those two versus moving up overloading one flank and turning it into hammer and anvil. Which, onto my game against Dom, which is what I should have done. And I didn't, and I didn't actually. The only thing I split was my sisters, and we were playing with these 2 buildings that were not wide enough to hide a rhino. They weren't ruins; they were those like Batman buildings, basically. And so you could just see a sliver of them, and so they both got wiped turn 1 by dreadnoughts and eradicators, and that was basically my objective ability gone. The rest of my army, there wasn't anywhere else to hide. We had to agree that these tiny little ruins were obscuring because they were not over 5 inches, and the game would have been over instantly if we hadn't decided that they were obscuring. Even still, the deployment error, and then like I just had no play. My army was in the middle. There was nowhere to hide, and that was it. So my game was one of the worst games I've ever played. I only scored 10 points in total. Got tabled like bottom of 2 or something like that. Freaking Flamer Aggressors wiped out Bertha like in 1 round of shooting. It was just flamed to death. One could make an argument as to whether that should be able to happen or not. But anyway, it was horrible, and we don't have to talk too much about it.
Is that the damage 2, Sergeant?
Well, only the sergeant's damage 2, and then like it doesn't matter. It's +1 to wound, and it's like extra AP, and
and 144 hits.
It's crazy. Okay, so round 3, Francois.
So round 3, I'm on the exact table you just talked about, which I will agree is not a fantastic table. The terrain was narrow, and so there wasn't too much hiding places. And I was up against Death Guard. I was up against Will Paul, who you played game 1, I believe. And Will's a great opponent. He knows what he's doing with the Death Guard. It's a strong list. And I think the one mistake that maybe I did is I should have deep struck my Eradicators, or outflanked them rather. I hid them in the very few hiding spots that existed on that table. but I did not expect the Plagueburst Crawler's mortars to go hot round one. Because usually my experience with Plagueburst Crawler mortars is they do very little. D6 hitting on 4s, like I'm not too afraid of those things normally, but again, this is something I need to train myself to do. There's always the possibility that the rolls are going to turn hot, and so I should have removed that possibility from the table by outflanking the Eradicators. Keeping them on the table is good because then I could have popped them up, advanced, and shot turn one, but I never got the opportunity to do that because the Plagueburst mortars did too much damage. So that's on me. Going second was a problem. You also had the flat 3 damage last cannon equivalent on those
that's
tanks.
nasty.
And I mean, I just bounced against as killy as White Scars are. Death Guard, they can be super resilient, especially once you start spiking those demon saves and those feel no pains. Just to give you an example of something that, again, I put myself in that position, so I'm not blaming the dice. I just want to give you an example of how resilient Death Guard can be. Those mythic blight haulers, like the little tanks with teeth, two of them did not die to Blade Guard in Assault Doctrine for 2 full fight phases. So I charged them, bounced, fell back and charged again, because that's what Blade Guard can do. All 3 Blade Guards were still alive, so that's still 14 attacks, hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s, +1 to wound, 3 damage flat per sword with AP, so on the demon save. 2 full fight phases. They bounced. So this is the kind of thing that can happen when the dice go spiky sometimes, especially when you have a 5-up invuln and a 5-up feel no pain. It will happen, and it did. And then at the same time, I had my 10-man strong Assault Intercessor, 41 attacks on the charge, damage to AP2, hitting 2 Wound Terminators. Granted, they have feel no pains. 41 attacks, +1 to wound, rerolling wounds. They failed to kill 5 Terminators. They killed 4. And 1 Terminator was left alive with a flail, and that single Terminator killed 10 Intercessors.
Yep.
1 Terminator killed all 10
freaking flails
Intercessors.
are stupid.
So it's, well, okay, so the flail is really good, but it's still unlikely that you'll kill 10 Intercessors with 1 flail. That you need to go super hot to do that. But it's also really unlikely that my 10 Intercessors on the charge won't kill 5 Terminators, because yes, they have a 4-up save at that point and a 5-up feel no pain, but it's 41 attacks, hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s, wounding on 4s, rerolling all wounds at 2 damage apiece, right?
Yeah,
So,
and they're only 2 wounds. That's
at that point, I just started laughing, and I went, well, it's that kind of game. Like, I don't think, other than not deep striking the Eradicators, I feel I played that right. And I was still fairly close in the end. Like, again, a 15 to 20 point loss, which that's not much in 9th edition. That's really actually a fairly tight game.
Yeah.
And it was a super fun game. We were both tired, so we were kind of loose and joking around and having a good time. And it was good practice for the Scars. Now I'm more aware of what they can do. I can see the potential. I have some changes I want to make to my list, but I really, really love how they play. So much more fun than Iron Hands and Ultramarines.
Okay, Nick, your last game.
Well, my last game was against the Knights.
Okay.
Rickard and his Knights, and it was like hammer and anvil deployment. This one's tough because my army can kill Knights, but it has to like specifically set up to do it.
Yeah.
You know, the Demon Prince can do it. The Flamer can put some wounds on. Like there's elements to it that can do wounds to Knights, but not one individual unit really can kill Knights. It all has to kind of work together. This was the only game I went first, and I debated whether I want to go first or not. But I decided, you know what, I'll go first. This time I could teleport the rubrics, and they did what they normally do now because I had them on the table, and I kept them on the table. I learned my lesson, but Knights, based on what he had, weren't, because most of his shooting, because he had some Forgeable Knights, were a bit shorter range than normal. Like he didn't have a double battle cannon knight or anything like that. So they were backlined in the hammer and anvil deployment. My turn 1, they teleport onto one of the objectives. It was just you had 1 in your deployment zones, 2 in the mid board, and that was it. So they teleported 1 there within 12 inches of one of his knights. Veterans of Long War, rapid fire, pulled off like 10 or 12 wounds from one of the knights, good enough. Then they'll just sit there and hold that objective and do what they can. And the rest of it was, honestly, it was still so I ended up winning like 80 to 10 or something. So it was a big, big win for me. But the thing with knights is I'm finding in this edition either they kill you or they get killed. There's I know I think it's kind of rare that it's like a very close game with them. Either they level you or they don't. I suppose lucky for me that I have some Death Guard elements in the rubrics that I can take a beating, and then while they get to me, then I can deal with them one piece at a time. And that's exactly what happened. You had the Gallant, just the fighty one. Had the only way that thing can do anything is it runs up to you. So it ran up to me. I kind of stalled it a little bit with the vehicles, the little Mephitic Blight haulers and whatnot, and then went in with the Demon Prince and the Spawn. They were able to kill it, deep struck the Death Shroud in ruins on his side because he had one of the Helverins on an objective. And then their next turn, they were able to walk up, charge, and kill the Helverin, take his objective. And then it was really just, maneuvering like my Flamer guy, Armon, and the Demon Prince around whatever was alive at the time to shield them and then dish damage. And then the Demon Prince would jump out when he could. But like I said, I think it was turn 2 or turn 3 where I managed to kill like three of his big knights, and he had, I think, one knight left. But it wasn't too far off. Like he had pulled all my Mephitic Blight haulers, and he killed one of the Plague Burst crawlers. He was getting pretty close to getting to my squishy stuff. So it wouldn't have taken much for him to spike something, and then I would have been in real trouble. But I got lucky that game, and I won.
Yeah. All right. Cool. My final game was against Jeremy, and we played on this table with a central rune, and the game would have been so different if that rune was turned 90 degrees because it was wider one way than the other. As it was, it provided very little, and the objectives were kind of in the open. And actually, before the game, we had almost just decided to not play because we were both so tired at that point. But we kind of played it, and I think I got to turn 3, scored 14 points, and got tabled. It did this really nice trick where he put he rammed his Electro Priests into my unit of Sisters, which were arguably too far forward, killed the unit of Sisters, obviously, and then they gained 3-up invuln from that. And then he has a stratagem which gives them a 2-up invuln. So now I got these guys on my home objective with 2-up invuln. So I put my whole army and surround it and go into it. And then at the last minute, which is something I totally didn't see coming, he decided to take the saves in combat on his armor. And so they all died. And so now my whole army is ready to be shot. And he just kind of wasted me. So that was the game, basically. But yeah, it's like I was super tired. I didn't really think my game plan out very well. I split fire on those 2 annoying flyers, which I shouldn't have. So I ate 2 turns of mortals instead of just 1. And I didn't deploy well. And my game plan was just bad from the beginning. And then he just advanced up, and there was nowhere really to hide. If I hadn't died that turn, the next turn, everything was in the open to be shot anyway. So it was like, no good. Okay, cool. So, moving on from that, who knows when our next tournament's going to be? What changes are you making to your list, Francois?
Well, for the White Scars, I think it's going to depend on what the Codex gives us.
Yes,
but
that's right.
In the abstract, I'm hoping that Blade Guard and Outriders, the bikes, go to a larger unit size because 3 is a really awkward unit size. And if they do, what I would do is turn my 2 units of Blade Guards into 1 unit of 5, so that drops 1 model. Turn my 3 units of 3 bikes into a unit of 5 and a unit of 3, drop a model again. That saves me some points. I would remove the Dreadnought, save some more points. Probably remove 1 of the Impulsors, again, save some more points. And then with all those points that I've just saved, I would put in a 3rd unit of Eradicators. And probably more Assault Intercessors because they did a lot of work for me. They're a really, really strong unit. I was pleasantly surprised by how they performed for the points. So you get a lot of combat punch from those guys.
So you're not in this chat, but I'll just spoil for you Diogo's latest creation, which I think is White Scars, isn't it? Yeah, it's White Scars. Okay,
it
so
White
Khan,
Scars,
Captain on Bike, Thunderhammer, Captain on Bike, and then 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 Assault Intercessors, 3 Invictor Warsuits and a Judicar, and that's it.
Yeah. Oh, the Judicar is something. The Judiciar, pardon,
Yeah.
is something that I would want to bring in as well. That can work, except when the Codex come, we know that 2 captains is going to be illegal. So planning on a list like that right now is kind of pointless because they've already previewed that it's going to be 1 captain per detachment. So count plus captain is not going to work in 3 weeks.
Well, enjoy it while you can.
Yeah, you got 3
Well,
weeks.
I mean, I would agree with that, except I don't think I'm going to play in a tournament until the spring.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
the way that COVID
Don't say
numbers
that.
are going.
No,
I'm not
November
sure.
RTT.
I'm not sure that they will change the 3-man unit size. I mean, those guys.
So it's hard.
Are so
It's hard to
strong.
tell, right? Because aggressors started at 3, went to 6. Eliminators started at 3, stayed at 3. I'm thinking bikes are almost certainly going to go to a larger unit size because 3-man bikes are kind of weird. Blade Guard I could see staying at 3. Eradicators I would hope will stay at 3 because they're already impressive enough with just 3.
Yeah.
So my guess is Eradicators stay at 3, bikes go to 6, and Blade Guards fill up a coin. It could be one way or the other. But that's just my guess.
I don't know. Do we know what the unit size is going to be for heavy intercessors? Hopefully, it's not 10.
10.
Oh
It is
God,
10.
30 wounds
Yeah.
to go.
You know it's 10 for a
God.
fact?
Yeah, we know it's 10. Yeah, they previewed it.
30 wounds in it. Oh man.
Well, yes and no. If you do the math, their offensive output is actually less than a 10-man intercessor squad. So they're more resilient, but they don't per point. I mean, if you do the math per point, they are more resilient than regular intercessors, but they're not as punchy.
But you don't need them to
So-
be, man. You just need them to sit there with 30 wounds.
Right.
Iron
So
Hands.
I think they're going to be okay, and probably will shine in something like Iron Hands, where you can give them an invuln and feel no pain. That's assuming that they don't get rid of Father of Our Future in the Codex, which they might. Like, again, I think it's a little pointless to do any theory crafting regarding Marines, because in 3 weeks we'll know for sure whether or not we're right.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's fun.
For sure.
It's fun to
It's
speculate
fun. Okay, fine.
and argue.
I'm a killjoy.
Yeah.
Okay, Nick, what are you doing to your list, if anything?
I am changing my list. I don't think I necessarily need to. Like that RTT, I think a little like you, Darren, tired. Like I have to drive almost 2.5 hours to the RTT. So like I already started off a little tired because I wake up pretty early and whatever else, and then the drive and whatnot. I almost do better at GTs because you go to a hotel first and then you're rested for the next night. But anyways, I don't think I had to do too much, but I did make some changes based on the tournament. So for one, Chris and I again had been going back and forth, and he'd been pushing Nurglings, and my big hesitation on Nurglings was like, oh, another detachment means 2 more CP I lose. But then when you look at the CP expenditure, it's like I use them for just kind of like little things here and there. It's not like a big CP strategy I have. So if I shore up a big weakness with that CP, just like we spoke, then I think that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I drop the Scarab Terminators. I reduce my rubric brick a little bit. They're 16 men, not 20 men. I also got rid of the spawn, but I added a detachment of demons where I'll have the super unkillable Lord of Change, and I've played with him before, and he's frustrating for opponents. What he gives me is a little bit of extra smite. He's super hard to kill, but he also flies. So that's important too, because I'll be able to get him to where I need him, and he'll be able to tie things up and distract the opponent. And maybe he's tough enough to do stuff like Psychic Ritual, just sit in the middle of the board and cast Psychic Ritual and not care if he's getting shot at, because he's got a 3-up invul, -1 damage, 6-up feel no pain, healing wounds, and all that. With 3 units of Nurglings, took them because now, regardless of whether I go first or second, I can start on the objectives in the mid board, forcing my opponent, if they don't want me to get points, to go after the Nurglings. But they also have the other function of people that have, in both my games, there was not both of them had, but my first game had Drop Pod, and then the second game had the Cerberus Raiders. So Drop Pod shows up, Deep Strike turn 1. Cerberus Raiders have the scout move, so then if he goes first, he's charged and tagged everything turn 1. So what the Nurglings can do is not only they start on the objectives, and give me that early lead and early push, but they also prevent that kind of turn 1 Deep Strike, scouting elements being able to approach my area. And then 2 units of 5 Furies, a unit that I don't think I've ever seen played. It's a 45-point 5-man unit. If there's inch 4-up in ball, T3, they're super weak, but they're 12-inch move fly infantry. And so what I like about that is they're so small that I can be able to hide them a little bit, but also having a fast infantry could be helpful for secondaries like banners and scramblers and whatnot, because I felt like that was something I had a bit of trouble with less infantry. I had kind of less less ability to perform some of those other secondaries. And then look, if somebody wants to shoot at 45-point unit, by all means, I don't, with a 4-up in ball, you're going to spend more effort than you want to killing them, and then that's still a win for me. So that's what I'm going to work on. I wish that we didn't have this spike in COVID cases and stuff, because I would have liked to have been able to test out this list sooner than later, but it is what it is, I suppose.
Very cool. So I talked about how I changed my list yesterday on Tactica. You can watch that. Basically, my new 4.8 list involves a lot more vehicle killing, because it occurred to me after the tournament that actually there were a shit ton of vehicles there. Like a lot. And that I had no way of really killing almost any of them. And they were both killing me and eating up objectives. So that was a eureka moment I had at the end of the day. But yeah, so my list is basically pretty similar, but just includes a 400-point vehicle killing flyer now. But
it's similar, but now it has an Ares gunship.
Yeah. I've given up a lot to include that, and I might have to switch things around a little bit more, but we can't really test anything right now, which is really annoying. So, but yeah, so we will see how that turns out. Probably going to go through another iteration later tonight, because I've been brewing things in my head. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for talking about your RTT experiences, guys. As we mentioned, we don't know when the next one's going to be. Everything's a little bit unclear right now, but hopefully we'll be able to do at least some streaming, maybe dedicate some time, because we're still on each other's trusted lists. Although with our kids going to school, maybe that list is not as secure as it used to be. But we'll see. We'll be safe. And yeah. Okay, let's see if there's any questions on the Discord. Anybody in chat has questions, please put it down. Let's see. Discord questions. Okay. Okay. Okay, there's no questions on Discord. No questions on chat, so that's okay. It's 10 o'clock. We'll... one question came to you, Nick, from Jeremy. What do you think about the tree? I presume he means the Nurgle tree.
Yeah, I like the Nurgle tree, but I think... So I had some lists in mind actually using Iron Warriors and Obliterators and Demons. So like a Nurgle Demon detachment, but then running some Iron Warriors that are Nurgle with Obliterators and whatnot, and maybe some Demon engines. The big problem with the tree now, though, is the rules that they can't have fortifications within 3 inch of other pieces of terrain. I feel like you're a little hamstrung there, because on some tables, at least the way we want tables to be made up with terrain, you wouldn't have a lot of opportunity to put that down. And then even if you could, it would probably be in some awkward spot that you wouldn't want anyways. So I think until we see like expanded rules on that, or house rules coming out from big tournaments that kind of guide the community, it's hard to really invest in that kind of idea.
Yeah. I don't know. The last time I saw trees was when Oblits and Trees was a thing, which was like, it's a while ago.
I played that at CanHammer team tournament like 3 years ago, like at the beginning of 8th against 9-0 Blitz, surrounded by a tree. I can't remember how that went. I'm sure he beat me, but I remember it being quite tough. Yeah. That's for sure.
Okay, we had a question from Rickard about the Ares, which is the flying vehicle killing thing that I've put in my list now, versus the Orion, which is almost exactly the same, but it's got more infantry-based guns and a transport capacity. I think can carry like 10 custodies or something. it's pretty straightforward. I need to kill vehicles, so I'm going to run the one that kills vehicles. The Orion's really more about killing infantry, heavy infantry. I don't need the transport capacity, and it's actually like 70 more points or something like that, if you can believe it. So, that's why I run the Ares, because that's what I need, is vehicle killing. And we have very little in our army to kill high toughness at range. We have, like, actually very little. And the Ares is probably one of the few things. So we're not really a ranged army, by and large, since the Cladius nerf.
Cladius doesn't get the
No,
job.
man. Strength 7 doesn't kill vehicles. Especially without some kind of re-rolling wounds. And the Storm Cannons kill vehicles, but there's too few shots. You know, they need twice the amount of shots to really be good anti-vehicles. So there it is. And you can't always rely on being able to kill things in combat, unfortunately.
No, it can get tough to get to them. Like I'm finding this while we stand, we fight a troublesome secondary, actually. Because a lot of people are putting that on tough for recoverable vehicles like the AMEC one, and it can actually get really challenging to get to them without, overextending.
Yeah, so the Ares takes that, makes that a risky secondary to take. You're going to lose 5 to 10 points off that in one turn, possibly. So, that's it's actually a nice little tech there that after talking with Carlos on the Monday. Okay. I think that's about it, guys. Thanks for joining us again.
What's our topic for next week?
So next week there will be no podcast because I have something like almost every night on the schedule, unfortunately. Unless Chris wants to stream a podcast, which he can, of course. He has all the stuff, so we'll try and make that happen. But the week after for sure we'll reconvene if we don't do it next week. And I think we came up with a bunch of topics that we want to cover for the next few podcasts. So keep that in your calendars. And so we will see everybody next week. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you to our patrons. Thank you for everybody who supports the channel, our sponsors. And that's about it. So good night.